the agenda. It's an opportunity to meet a ton of people. You're gonna meet all of
Sometimes
them.
it's just the way it
And you know what? This is why I like to do it from the like you're not trying to do it on the screen. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm not like doing people to watch me. It takes me a while.
Some people who really know me just like.
You're gonna be like, paper crunching. I know it is. Crunching.
The other thing is sugar, if I ever give you a check.
Yeah.
Oh, it's part of it. And the article.
Oh,
okay.
I think I watched it.
Interview. Worked in the field for, she's getting Harvard University. To the white matter of the brain.
Peter, how big of an organ? You watch the football. This is actually just camouflage.
Yes, I do.
Actually, asking.
They just want to, just want to they're in control of it.
No more.
The children just gave me the number for jail the other day. They did an analysis of all jail that day. 82% of them were vicious. They were
Keep it disguised as an organ.
I have an organ structure too. Sometimes you just have to blend in. Love it.
At the university. Oh, yeah. You need, I went to Southern Oregon.
So Peter, I went to the Husky game only one time at Autzen.
Oh, you know what? I do know. She wants to be part of this group.
Husky Stadium.
I remember her now.
Anyway, that,
Nolte, remember? Nolte?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys.
You weren't there in 1980.
No, but I was at Autzen.
Really? Last time I did it in person.
You need a gavel?
Oh, I didn't get a gavel.
We're gonna get started, guys. I'm the honorary gavel right here.
Well, go for it somewhere.
Mine down.
People are looking at you. Look at me.
So the game gets going and
Let's get started, okay?
You gotta reel her in. She'll just keep telling that story.
Yeah, you have to
I might want to
read
hear
it.
that story.
Sorry, Roger.
Okay, well, convene, that's the word. We'll convene the meeting now. And we could make some quick introductions and announcements. If anybody has anything as it comes around, and start with Holly.
Hi, everybody. Holly Harris, Behavioral Health Director.
Jessica Vieira, community member.
That's Dr. Bohm.
Shannon Bristol-August, Program Manager for Comprehensive Care for Youth and Families, Deschutes County.
Lee Butler, Clinical Supervisor, Ben Treatment Center.
Paul Partridge, I'm the Program Manager for the Deschutes Intellectual Developmental Disabilities.
Michael Schultz, the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office.
Christina Lee, Board Member, and I work for St. Charles. Amber Clegg, I'm staff member with Deschutes County. I'm a behavioral clinical program manager.
I'm Julie McFarland, and I'm a community member. And I do have an announcement. Tomorrow is NAMI's kind of second annual big walk in Bend, big fundraiser down at Pioneer Park at 9. Anybody can come. You don't have to have registered. And I think it's going to be a better turnout than last year.
Tomorrow, no.
Yeah.
And I'm Melinda Thomas. I'm an attorney with the High Desert ESD and board member.
I'm here, Deschutes County Commissioner. I'm your liaison.
I'm Roger Olson. I'm the chair of this. And by the way, I do have a BHAB team signed up for the walk tomorrow. If you really wanted to join a team or make a donation to a team, the one that says BHAB. So far, it's me and my wife and my son.
Emily Burke-Smith, Executive Assistant for Health Services.
Okay. Up on the board, we have Yes, Linda. Introduce yourself, please.
Does she know? Oh, you're on mute.
There you are.
She's on mute.
She may not be able to hear us.
You're on mute, Linda.
Can she hear us?
Linda, you're muted.
There we go.
Oh, we lost her.
Callie.
Oh, Callie, how about you?
Hi, everybody.
I'm unmuted now.
Oh, there you go.
Apologize.
You go first, Linda.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Tech challenged. So I'm here as a guest. Patty Adair had put me in touch with you guys when I had expressed an interest in seeing if I could add any value as a resource. I am an IDD foster provider in the adult foster homes. And after 12 years, I thought I should get more involved and not just be passive and see if I could add some energy and value to the group.
Okay, welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I'm Callie.
Hi, everybody. Callie Remley on the Behavioral Health Population Health Team at Pacific Source.
Okay, one order of business. To approve the minutes from last meeting.
Some more introductions, Roger.
Oh, there's a couple more people.
Oh,
Dana's there, and who else do I see?
so Dana's not there.
Danielle.
She just signed on.
Okay,
Hi, all. Yeah, Danielle McBain, parent of a kiddo who accesses resources and board member.
I didn't see your name.
And I'm here.
also
I've
there's
been here.
Carol, Lorelei.
Oh, hi,
Yeah,
Lorelai.
hello. I'm Lorelei Krasanik, board member. Thank you.
Anybody else out there?
Hi, Cameron Fisher, OSU Cascades and board member.
Okay, hi, Cam.
This is Stephanie Etzman. I'm a parent and a board member.
Oh, good. We got a lot of people here. You're not showing up on our screen.
It has the thing.
See, there's the arrow, so somebody's got to be.
I had my camera off, but I can turn it on.
There we go. Now we got a full screen. We're just showing one at a time. So it wasn't. Everybody wasn't up there.
Did Cameron introduce herself?
Yeah, Cameron did.
Okay.
One of these days we'll get used to all this.
Kristen, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Kristen Mizaki, adult outpatient program manager. I also oversee the hubs. I'm in Redmond today. Good to see everybody.
Bradley's also on there.
Okay. I was wondering if you guys could hear all right. But,
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if I should introduce myself or not. I'm a community member and founder of a collaborative care management company.
Oh, Bradley, thank you so much.
Bradley, we just emailed today. Yeah.
Yes, we did. Hi, Holly.
Okay, with that, guess we do need to make this a quick approval of the minutes. Anybody read the minutes? Pretty extensive. It was a really interesting meeting. I went back and watched it again the other day. Thanks for doing that.
Those folks really appreciated the opportunity and asked me to read that.
Yeah.
I'm going to approve the meeting minutes from, what was it, April? I'm losing track of my months.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
very good. Got that done.
No, then we have to actually
Oh,
vote.
now we have to, everybody approve that.
I know, aren't I bad?
Sergeant at arms now.
Well, no, I was in a meeting the other day and they weren't following Robert's rules at all. And there was no motion made. And I go like, this is not what, because it's documented. We have to do things, you know, if they're documented correctly. It's transparent for the community.
Okay. Announcements.
So I just have one announcement, well, two. Last month I wasn't here because I got married. So that trumped this, and we had a good time. But also, I wanted to put an announcement out that I've had some feedback that we amend some of our meeting structure to allow this group to be more of a work group during our time. There are some folks that would like to be more participatory of some development of what we want and have done, but are not able to kind of carve out time outside of this meeting for 150 reasons. And there's been a few examples. For example, with the development of the bylaws and the end of year review, and also the development of the onboarding process. That took a lot of work and there was a lot of participation, but there wasn't that carved out time to bring to the full board and kind of recognize the work that went into it. And we also have a couple of things in front of us, such as how we go about providing letters of support to the community and or to submit to the commissioners that really need the full board to have some participation and development of that. So that's one. And also we're going to have a brief intro around the the youth position for the board, that when we started to talk about it in a subcommittee setting, it became really clear that there were some broader things to consider. So I'd like to just put a motion or just ask if people are, or maybe even say, ask, say, / get feedback on, if folks would be interested in having some, and it may be the whole meeting, so it would not be a presentation. In lieu of a presentation, this would be a working board. And so I'd like to propose that and open briefly, so I don't want to take up time into our presentations today. So in the next minute, how people feel about that.
I like it.
Okay. Others?
It aligns with some of those goals and things about what we want to after our time to be member.
Okay.
I think that would be a good use of our time.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree. I was really thinking about the school's presentation last month and how they had some fairly concerning data to present, and we definitely don't want to set up a dynamic where we are just listening but not responding and not doing anything. So forming a cohesive working group where we can write some letters of support or some other action items would feel really good to me.
Okay, so I will get with Roger and see where we can have that carve out in our agenda, or, because I'm not sure what's on schedule for future and we don't want to be disrespectful to others, but still have that because we're kind of halfway through the year almost. And the other thing is offline, I will consult with Holly about the scope of staff, if they would be required to come, or if it's out of their scope, I'll do that offline. Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. And that meets my goals. I'm just the last year and a half, 2 years have been monumental in my mind from where this board used to be. A lot of people, Christina was one of them, and Lorelei, and Danielle, and Cameron, and Stephanie were all different parts of the bylaws and the onboarding process and everything. And so it's just bringing in the whole board into doing some of that work. I mean, basically, for many years, we were just a listening board. And so I'm really excited to move forward this way. You want to take a few minutes, Holly, and tell us what's happening in the real world?
I got Jessica's handy little cheat sheet here, which is super helpful to me, although I just left my cheat sheet, which I left somewhere. Okay, so one thing that happened says upcoming audits, researchers, or visitors. We did have a visitor. A new Oregon Health Authority director, Dr. Hathi, came to Central Oregon and met with the Tri-County region along with Wheeler County, I think was the other one, which was interesting. It was just not one of the usuals, but it was a great visit and we were really impressed by her. She's 32 years old, So she's got a really big job at a fairly young age, but has done a lot in her time. Worked for, under the administration at the White House, like has done a lot. And she was really sharp and seemed to have a good understanding of the ground level work as well as really high level systems issues. So she was a listening session. She did just that. She came and listened. So that was really nice. That's not always been the case in our experience with OHA. And so we were also really transparent with her about some of the challenges we've been experiencing at the state level, and did not hold back, but we're very respectful as well. But just some of the challenges in getting things done, and having the system moving entirely too slowly, contracting processes, but then just also needing OHA to really lead some big initiatives statewide, and that just hasn't been happening. And they haven't been showing up in the same way that we all think they should. So that feedback was given. She was very receptive to that. She knew there was work to be done at OHA. She had been going through, we were like probably middle of the road in terms of her rounds across the state. So that it was great. We'll see though. Proof's in the pudding. That's how I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic. Cautiously optimistic. And we've been promised a lot of things over the years, and it really comes down to the actions they're taking. So we'll see. We said that too. Staffing updates. We're doing fairly okay across the board in terms of our general outpatient teams and things like that. We're still very much struggling in the crisis world and with our forensic positions. So any kind of specialty position, alternative position that's after hours, those are still continuing to be a massive challenge. So we're exploring working with a recruiter or exploring alternative ways to post things. I mean, we are doing everything what we can think of to do, and just that we'll see. We're going to keep chipping away at it, but it's brutal still in those areas.
Do you have per diem positions?
Like hourly?
Yeah, just like per diem, like.
Yeah, we have we have on call.
On call.
Oh yeah, we do. The problem with on call is you get people that think they want to do it, and then they just aren't dependable. They don't want to do it in a night shift. Like nobody wants to work a night shift.
Is a night shift 12 to 8?
Night shift at the stabilization center isn't really anything we can get anybody to do. But technical night shift.
Throw it out.
Let's just be honest. I'll take whatever hours anyone wants to give us. But at 11:30 to 7 a.m. is our
That's a young person shift. I just have to tell you.
So those are still areas that we are continuing to work through and challenges, but we're not alone. Happening across the country. Let's see.
Is there any room for negotiation with the hospital, which has a 24/7 unit that sees lots of acute behavioral problems roll in the door?
It would be interesting to have that conversation because they really depend on us for after hours work in the EDs. So we still respond to hospitals to cover a lot of the behavioral health things in the EDs. They do a big portion of it, especially in Bend. They have 24/7 social work, but in Redmond they do not. So we respond to Redmond all the time. And I don't know that the hospital. I think there is some interesting dialogue happening at the state level around crisis programs' obligation to respond as a hospital. It's historically been in our contract and referenced in OAR, but there's been a shift. And so we're going to be having those conversations because, the problem with crisis programs 24/7 is that we're much like law enforcement. Like when you are 24/7 and somebody else doesn't have their 24/7 staffing, like the hospital, for instance, if their men's social worker calls out, we're then responsible. So the idea of them taking that on is probably not something they're going to be willing to do. But we are definitely having conversations about what hospitals' role and obligation and some of this work is at a state level. It's complicated. It's really complicated. But law enforcement gets this. Like whenever there's at the end of the day, we're considered essential workers and we're expected to respond. So unless some major statutes change, I don't know how much we'll get others to help us with that.
Yeah, and I think the hospitals are still struggling. I know they've gotten better with their raises, but they're still nowhere near what they should be at full staffing, from what I understand.
Right, they're in terms of like their nurses and other, but they're doing okay in behavioral health now. I don't know what I'm tapping into anything that they've done that we can learn from, but it's just continues to be a challenge. Let's see. So one other real quick thing. Many of you know that crisis program manager Adam Goggins, he has stepped down from his role. Today was actually his last day. we support the decision. It was not a negative departure in any way, shape, or form. You don't know about some of these roles until you get in them and how difficult they can be. And it was a personal choice for him to really return back to clinical work. So we're in the middle of recruiting for the crisis program manager position. We have an interview set up for a couple weeks from now, and actually we've gotten a number of candidates. So we're very excited about that.
Oh, and I can share to this room is that the apartments in Bend are now 11% vacant. I heard that from Business Oregon a week ago. Thursday after my meeting with the Hospital Authority Board, that there's only 5 people on that. Anyway, 11%, and there's 1,500 to 2,000 more apartments that are going to be dropping into the system. So what I'm telling people is that if you know someone that's renting and they're a good renter, they need to go to their landlord and ask to renegotiate what they're paying, because our rents in Bend are really high. And people need to be able to afford to buy food. I mean, it's a really rough time for so many Americans. But it could help with filling positions. And if we do get a break, and then of course somebody came up to me this morning and said, well, their friend was a landlord and he had people that had been in their apartment for 2 years not paying a dime. So that's the other side of the story. But it's definitely, things are definitely shifted in Bend. It's not that way in Redmond, but in Bend, there's definitely there's a big, huge vacancy.
Okay, well, that can be helpful for, negotiating those things and helping, because it is a factor in recruitment, that's for sure. It definitely hinders our ability to recruit.
That's what I was told by Tom Schnell from Business Oregon. Now, our treasurer said he wasn't sure if it was quite that high, but it's definitely going up because there's that 1,500 to 2,000 that are going to be going into the system. It was in the 9s. It was 9.4, and then I was told it was 11. So, but for people working, I really hope they can renegotiate and get a break.
Many years ago, I moved out of an apartment, and the guy said, "I'm really sorry to see you go. You're the only one that's been paying rent." It was a fourplex, but still.
Well, we're proud of you for paying rent.
Let's go back.
Oh my gosh.
I've been doing this wrong. I didn't know you could pay.
I didn't know that was an option.
Totally doing this wrong.
Just one last thing, our budget hearing, we had a budget presentation that we did a 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago now. Went really great. I think we don't have a lot of asks in behavioral health. In fact, we only have just one small special request for the IBD program. And so we have our budget hearing scheduled, I think it's next week, where it's the official hearing that we will go before the budget committee. And I think that's when the decisions will be made about the budget. So we were in a nice position this year where we were able to sort of manage things internally with our budget, so no big asks. So yeah. So anyway, that's all public. You're welcome to watch those as they happen.
Starting Monday morning at 9, going to Thursday at whatever 5. But
they are full days.
But it's really excellent, and it is transparent to the community. I really wish more people would participate. I remember the first year in 18 when I was running, I actually went to all the budget hearings just to see what's going on. But we definitely have a belt tightening. These service providers that have been funded by Deschutes County, that were funded back to 23 levels, I'm like, anyone I see, I say, don't think you're going to get that money next year, because you can just feel things are tightening. And yet the market, what was it, at 40,000? So yeah, but that can always change. That's all I had.
I want to add one more thing. Our partners over at Public Health presented to the Board of County Commissioners the other day a great presentation on marijuana use and fallout from that. And Commissioner Adair found an article the very next day, I think, on
last weekend on marijuana in the Wall Street Journal, and from a woman who's been working on marijuana. She's like 81 now. She's not an MD, but this is her field. And if you would read that article, Wall Street Journal, you can Google it and find it. It's frightening because the marijuana goes into the white matter of the brain and the damage it's doing. And she actually saw that it was more addictive than maybe some other drugs that nobody really wants to talk about. And then I think she only cited 1 or 2 real reasons that it was actually helpful to people. Very specific reasons. So, and our youth thinks it, because it was approved medically, that there's all this goodness. And you saw the statistics in Deschutes County, our kids always try things more. It was 19 out of 100 kids that in 11th grade that had used marijuana within a month. It was, I think, a survey from 22, whereas 23 of those kids had used alcohol, but 19 of the 100 had used marijuana. And then when you add up the smoking numbers down at 4, marijuana and smoking, it was really, they were right there with alcohol.
And it was actually a partnership between public health and behavioral health, that presentation. It was our medical director, Dr. Murray, and Dr. Ann Linton, who really led that presentation, and Jessica Jacks with prevention was there to provide the prevention piece of things. So it was a great presentation. If you get a chance to watch it, it was really informative.
Somebody that works for Deschutes County, probably maybe, I don't know, 30, young, she goes, oh my gosh, Patty, I had no idea what marijuana really did. So I thank you so much for that presentation. They were outstanding. They really know what they're talking about. We have 6 kids under 16 in Crook County that still have psychotic disorder from marijuana use. And that's from a couple of months ago, and they're still floundering.
It was a great presentation.
Okay, Paul. Turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Roger. I'm gonna turn my camera on. I'm logged in, for those in the room. I'm logged in to this, and if I turn the camera on, then I don't have to turn around and they can see me. So that's what I'm doing.
Thanks, Abby.
It just occurred to me I can do that. So thank you for the time today, Roger. How much time do I have? Do I still have half an hour? Or
Yep.
Okay.
Maybe split it a little bit.
Okay.
12:28.
Well, there's three things that I know that are areas that are not strengths of mine. One is growing hair. 2 is crawling under houses and crawl spaces. I'm just too big for that. And the third one is brevity. So I'll try. Just a quick introduction of me for those who you may know my name and you see me in the meeting, but you don't necessarily know who I am and why am I talking about IDD. I have been working with individuals with developmental disabilities for just over 30 years now. I started in 1992 as a direct caregiver, supporting individuals in their employment goals, doing supported employment before Oregon realized that we really should be doing supported employment. So that's how I started, and then I started in county services as a case manager for Marion County in 97 or 8, I guess, and was there for 14 years as a case manager, as an abuse investigator for most of that time, then got into leadership, and then I got recruited to Yamhill Community Developmental Disability Program, where I managed that group. Was there for 6 years before I really got hooked and moved over here to Central Oregon. I've been here for I think just about 6 years. So that's me kind of in a nutshell. I just wanted you to know kind of the diversity of my background in terms of all the way from direct care for the folks that we are supporting to, administration of a program. So, I forgot, I got to share my screen. Great. So the objectives, I tried to encompass what you all kind of gave as input last month in terms of what you wanted to have covered as an agenda, a quick program overview, a little bit of data about what's happening with us, some innovations, vision, and kind of local focus. A little bit of news and what's going on right now with us, and a little bit around challenges. And there were some more specific ones that y'all mentioned, but I think they're all going to fit within those 5 bullet points. There's just a quick picture of our team that was taken in October of 2023 at a health services all staff meeting. And the cool thing about this photo is most of those folks are still here. And look how happy they look. It's because they work for Deschutes County. Our team is comprised of 49 full-time employees. So that's just a sampling of them there. Okay, so the program overview, I've broken this into kind of three main parts. The first of which is the front door to services. Eligibility is kind of how people enter. We need to determine whether they're going to meet our eligibility criteria, which are listed there. I'm not going to go through them. This is one of the ways I'm going to be more brief. But in short, we serve people from all the way from birth clear through the life cycle to death. We are unlike the rest of behavioral health. We're not really about an episode of care and looking to work a person out of service. We welcome folks to stay engaged voluntarily for as long as they choose to. So the eligibility process, this is one of the cumbersome things for families and individuals to work through. It does take a period of time. It involves gathering records. Sometimes we need to order a new evaluation. We can order an administrative exam to help make a determination as to whether a person meets our criteria that are listed there. That's one of the myths that I wanted to bust, is that we don't do any evaluations within our program. Sometimes people think, we have staff on that can do that. We have clinicians that we can refer to and authorize an administrative exam to do those, but we don't do any of that diagnostic in-house. Well, I'll pause and see if there's any questions around eligibility. Okay. The next kind of body of work, and the largest body of work in our, I'm going to use the acronym CDDP. That stands for Community Developmental Disabilities Program. So the largest body of work in a CDDP is case management. And this model, you can see the picture of the little guy. He's a little guy in a wheelchair. That's the individual that we are here to help have a better life. And that person is always in the center of everything that happens with case management. That's person-centered thinking, always keeping the individual in the center. But it really is a cycle. So you've got a model of a cyclical thing here, and it really is kind of a plan, do, check. If you're familiar with the plan, do, check cycle, it really begins with assessing not only the functional needs of a person, but what is important to them. So not just what's important for them, but what's important to. So those things are assessed. Then we get into the planning and the building an individualized service plan, which includes what? All the things that the person has objectives around wanting to get support in. And then it gets to the do part, or the access and referral, which are, our staff doesn't do any direct care. Our job is to coordinate in case management and help people access things. So that's the critical part, is helping them access a provider, a paid professional, or a natural support somewhere in the community where they can get the things that are important to and for them and that are listed in the plan. And then it gets down to the check part of the cycle, the monitoring, which I think all four of those aspects of case management are super important, but kind of in my mind, monitoring is really critical and maybe the most important part, because you can do all of the assessment, planning, and access and referral in the world, but if the circuits don't connect, if the provider entity doesn't come through and provide, then the person's not achieving the outcome of having a better life. So we need to be monitoring, checking. We at least on a quarterly basis, we're going to be checking in with people, making sure that their services that they're getting what it is that they're hoping to get.
Good question.
Yeah.
How are the IDD foster parents certified? Unless you're going to go into that.
Yeah, it's actually something I omitted from the slides, so thanks for bringing it up because I was actually going to insert it kind of in here. I think when I get into the array of things that
you can answer that.
I'll answer it then.
And then secondly, is the monitoring part of monitoring the certified foster parent, so you can wrap that in anywhere.
Okay. There's also a choice element in here for case management, and it's I'll mention it. It would be risky if I got into a lot of detail, and it is confusing. So I would invite my contact information, my phone number's on the last slide. So please do just get with me offline if you have questions about some of the stuff I couldn't get into detail on. But there is another choice of case management for adults who are not in comprehensive licensed settings, and that is a brokerage entity which can provide case management. And in Central Oregon, that option is full access high desert. So if you hear that, somebody talking about brokerage or full access, that's what it's about. Okay, data. This is just a side-by-side comparison of guess what? Oregon. Wasn't that? I'm like super thrilled that I was able to make that graphic back. Don't ask me how I did it. But Oregon versus Deschutes, and it just gives you an idea of kind of how we land. We're about 3.2% of the statewide IDD enrollment here, ranked about number 8 in terms of size. By enrollment of IDD, and I think that's fairly close in terms of population size as well. So I think
we're 6th in terms of population.
Are we 6th?
And so pretty close. That's interesting though. I'm curious why. Yeah, I mean, factors that affect enrollment.
I could tell you in registered vehicles.
Yeah, I bet we all have our niche, right?
Yeah, it'd be an interest. Well, one thing, the I-5 corridor tends to have a higher, the Willamette Valley and the I-5 corridor tends to have a higher percentage rate of individuals with IDD, and a lot of that has to do with when Fairview Training Center closed. Most of the development for community homes was done along the I-5 corridor. And so there's also a higher percentage of people who live in licensed settings in that region. So that would be my sort of novice explanation for that data anomaly. And then the ratios, you might notice that adults to kids, we have almost a 50-50 breakdown between children and adults, whereas statewide, the proportion is higher on the adult side. And might be for a similar reason because remember, we serve the lifespan. And so the adult portion of the lifespan is longer than the kid portion, and lots of adults in comprehensive service settings in more the metro and mid-valley region.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So if 288 or brokerage, does that mean you're serving with Deschutes County at about 640?
No, the brokerage is in addition to the 935. So the 935 is in Deschutes CBDP 288. So just over 1,000 children and adults in Deschutes County are enrolled in case management. Good question. Okay, so a breakdown of where people are. These are service settings. Let me see. I don't want to miss the. I'm going to talk about foster in here. These are the various service settings, and you can see the I don't know if you can see in the room, but the green is adult in-home. These are folks that are living in family home or their own home and have a Medicaid plan, so they get some supports in their own home. And then the blue are children in home, so similar. Those are the largest portions. And then we have a bunch of smaller wedges. That dark red one near the top says these are people with no services, so they're also known as case management only. They don't have any. They either don't have Medicaid eligibility, so we can't authorize any services other than case management, or they have chosen not to avail themselves to any Medicaid service. So that's about 115 of that 935 are for case management only. And then adult foster, about 50 people there, 75 in adult 24-hour. And then we've got a bunch of tiny little wedges for kids residential, kids foster. CIIS are a very specialized high behavioral or high medical need kids. Children Intensive In-Home Services is what that acronym stands for. And then a dozen or so folks in supported living. And I wanted to just highlight SACU. SACU is an acronym that stands for Stabilization and Crisis Unit. These are the state-operated homes that are kind of all over, well, not all over Oregon. Again, they're mostly along the I-5 corridor, lots of metro. That is our highest level of acuity kind of care setting for folks. And sometimes we have people land in our psych units or maybe in the jail, and they have super high challenging care needs usually behaviorally. And there's lots of advocacy from community partners. Well, what about SACU? Can we get them placed in SACU? I don't know how many times I've heard.
From me too.
Maybe from Holly.
Yeah,
what about SACU? So SACU is also all of these settings are home and community-based settings under the definition of Medicaid. They're we don't have any institutional settings in Oregon at all after the closure of Fairview and then Eastern Oregon Training Center. No more, everything is home and community-based. So even SACU, what happens for a person when they need that level of care is they get shipped across the mountains into a home and community-based setting, which is technically voluntary. So they can still walk out of there unless they're under a civil court commitment, which they could still walk out of there. But we could call you and have you work.
In the day it
we might say, Captain, can you drive over?
I know the Fairview system pretty well.
Yeah,
the old Fairview
system. So that's kind of, I don't want to go on too much on SACU, but sometimes it is the answer. But I usually, if you have a one-on-one conversation with me, I am I advocate away from utilizing them. I would much rather keep a Deschutes citizen with IDD in Deschutes in a home and community-based setting here, because the thing that's counterintuitive to the name of stabilization and crisis unit is that actually when we move someone from one community to another, it destabilizes them. And the long-term plan is that once that person gets stabilized in a SACU setting, they are then to step down into another setting. So then they get destabilized again in that transition. So if we could just skip that part and get them stabilized where they are, that's a way better plan if we can find ways to do it.
And I think what I've learned over the years with SACU is that in the traditional behavioral health world, we think of the state hospital level of care, and SACU was often akin to like what we do for folks who are civilly committed and are so dangerous they can't be in the community, so they are sent to the state hospital and treated there. And we and other community partner sites, we think SACU's got to be the same thing, but it's very much not the same thing. I've learned over the years that it is, not secure. It's not intended to operate any way, shape like the state hospital, and there really isn't an akin to the state hospital in the IDD world. And so it's been I've learned to stop advocating for that because it doesn't in certain cases. Because where I think there's a gap at IDD though is for the individuals, and this is not, they happen so infrequently, but when they happen, the outcomes for them are so awful. So with somebody who has severe IDD, sometimes a behavioral health component as well, that are really dangerous. They're either assaulting people or getting assaulted, or just in this really they can't care for themselves moment, and there really isn't much for them. And when that happens, they end up in jail. And then that's when I started advocating for SACU, because I'm like, they shouldn't be in jail for that. Like, it's terrible. But there's a gap there in terms of just that small segment of the population that is, they are not getting their needs met, and oftentimes the settings that we've created for them.
It's funny because a lot of the starting point is the jail.
Yeah.
And that's forgetting it. And I sit here and I listen and I'm thinking, because we have all these programs, right? But the starting point generally is the jail, especially when somebody starts declining pretty quickly. And we tend to forget about that in our community.
Yeah. And there, just from my experience, and it's a couple decades long working for community developmental disabilities programs, CDDPs, that when folks get referred to SACU, or used to be, there's a different acronym before, but anyway, when they get referred there is I'm really going out of my memory, and I used to supervise it when we had crisis programs. I supervised a crisis program in Mid-Valley, and most of the time when we ended up having folks go to SACU, there was a co-occurring mental health disorder. And so the underlying cause of why that person ever went to SACU is because they had a mental health condition that was not getting treatment. And still not getting treatment at SACU. The only difference was there was an army of state-paid, higher wage-paid caregivers in that state-operated home that were kind of, wrapping around this. And so there's an army of goons that are really not allowing the problematic behaviors, and that's how the person gets stabilized. But then we step them down, and guess what? All the behaviors, because of the underlying condition, come back out, and they fail, and they bounce anyway.
And I've taken people back to Fairmont because we get the list of the walkaways and we find them on the streets, and the personnel that we took them back to, always super nice. They knew exactly how to de-escalate, even before police officers had to do that. So,
sure. And again, Fairview no longer an option. No, intensive care facility IDD. No. Okay, foster licensing is the slide that I omitted, so I'll just talk about it. It's another function that we perform. We have personnel that license or certify licensing for adult foster and certification for kids foster. And we actually perform that not only for Deschutes, but for Jefferson by MOU as well. And with that, Linda is on the line. She's one of our lovely foster providers, and she's been through this. She can tell you how it really works. We won't go into a lot of detail here, but we, on an annual basis, come and do a renewal visit at Linda's home and other foster homes to make sure it's really a compliance visit to make sure that they're in alignment with the Oregon administrative rule that governs adult foster homes or children foster homes. And of course then that's in concert with case management. Usually a case manager goes along with that licensing visit. And the case manager is also doing that monitoring kind of in between licensing visits, and they talk to each other in between. So if a case manager maybe detects a challenge in the home that might be a violation, then they'll cross-report that to licensing. We also get reports from our law enforcement partners if they happen to go into a home and detect something that might be a problem. So that's kind of what the licensing looks like. Okay.
you give it about 5 more minutes?
I can, oh, all right.
We've got to split that time we had left between the two things.
Okay, then I really have to accelerate. Abuse investigations, another function of our office. There's mug shots of our investigators. They love that I have. I only put this in because I know they hate it. And they're not as attuned to trauma-informed supervision as the rest of our team, because they all used to be cops, so they really don't. They just take it. That's our abuse investigators. And there are the listings of the different allegations that we look at. We do a lot of collaboration with law enforcement on if something is of a criminal nature, then it goes up to law enforcement, and we partner with them to investigate. Okay, innovations. This is the guts of it. Spend less time on the rest. Let's see, we started in October of 2020. We stood up this mental health and IDD collaboration group. This group meets on a monthly basis. The focus of it is on training and building confidence for behavioral health clinicians. And it's just a platform. It's comprised of personnel from my office, from the IDD program, personnel from across the rest of, Deschutes Behavioral Health. So outpatient, we have an IYS person there that's a very reliable person. There's somebody from Crisis, Jill Kaufman sits on that group. Then we also have representatives from Full Access High Desert. So it's really kind of a multidisciplinary, how are we collaborating in terms of helping folks with IDD who have co-occurring mental health diagnoses access mental health care. So that's been going on for over 3 years now, and we're really proud of that. We celebrate successes and talk about challenges whenever we need to. Try to spend at least as much time celebrating successes when we have positive outcomes. These are, by the way, this innovation slide, these are things that we do that we're not contracted to do. So we have an intergovernmental agreement that says, Paul, we need to have your program doing all those things in the previous slides. These are the things that we're not these are the things we do because they need to be done to support people with IDD in Deschutes County. Okay, so outreach is another, doing community events. A couple of examples of community events that we do. We did Latino Fest last September. We're going to do it again this September. We just got done doing the first ever Oregon Intervention System training for families geared to Spanish-speaking family members. First in Oregon ever. I can't even tell you what it took for my staff to get that to happen, and to have translators and have the curriculum translated into Spanish. But we're very, very proud of that outreach. We do, about 10 of those a year. Our community partnerships, we do CIT training. We're a partner with CIT. My investigators help me to present on that. We do mandatory reporter trainings. The community partnerships are too many to really name. I just was on the phone this morning with a prospective provider who wants to set up a group home here or up in Redmond, and needed a little bit of technical assistance. So those are just some examples of community partnerships. Okay, upgrading a toolbox around safety planning. I could talk about, I actually would like to get invited back to talk about the LEDS database, because I know there's been a lot of interest here and I don't have time to get into it. But this is a way to have better outcomes when there are law enforcement contacts with our folks. And so all of those things are ways to actually have better outcomes and for individuals to have increase their independence related to things like law enforcement contacts or emergency preparedness. This is a vision, the exploring a future position for peer support. We have peer supports in other parts of behavioral health. We have not done that in IDD. We have staff who have lived experience as parents of people with IDD, but we have never hired a person with an intellectual or developmental disability. And I think that is a big swing and a miss. We would have way better outcomes and be able to serve the mission way better if we were to have a person on staff who could consult as a person with lived experience. So that's a vision of mine. I have not talked to the board about it yet, but plan to probably next fiscal year. It's an area for development. And capacity exploration, this is just, I mean, as you could see earlier, we have all kinds of opportunity to authorize Medicaid service, but the problem that we still have is that we don't have enough capacity. There's not enough personnel. It's not a very high paid wage job to support people with IDD, and that's something we need to continue to work on.
So Paul, I think we have to kind of stop there, unfortunately, to give the other presentation, but I truthfully have like 6 or 7 questions I could ask. So I think that maybe I'll write them down and maybe do find some time to bring you back.
We'll get
Very
the slide deck sent out to you.
I think you gotta have it come back, because you're just kind of getting to the part that we can do something about.
We don't have time either, so we have to, sorry.
Okay, sorry, Paul.
So Paul, I'd like to make a comment both to you and to Patty. I started in pediatrics over 50 years ago, and no one knew anything about any disabilities to speak of. We put kids and adults in institutions, and they went in and they never came out again until they were buried.
Yeah, that's not right either.
The kind of talk that you gave today and sophistication and the outcomes you have just wasn't imaginable in the distant past. It was just like a Victorian prison for people who had intellectual and many other kinds of disabilities. So when you hear criticisms of stuff not happening and it's not perfect, this is one of those things where the historical arc is towards real justice, better outcomes, and it's a credit to us as a society that we're even began in the distant past to talk about it, and that you're having the programs and outcomes that you have today. It's not perfect, but wow, what a difference.
Well, and Dr. Baldwin, thanks for saying that. And if I may, when I started in this field in the 90s, my caseload were home adults. And this was before we had any opportunity to authorize any home and community-based service. And the stories that I would hear from family members, from parents, were that my pediatrician told me when we had Johnny to put them at Fairview and forget about them. It was heartbreaking. And those parents chose not to do that, but to keep them at home and just care for them as parents do. And so, yeah, in the 25 years since I've been in CDP service, we have turned that story around to where, you know, that's just not happening anymore.
Well, their life expectancy, I heard that they used to live to like 30 years old, and one of my neighbors had twins and one of them was an IDD. It's amazing to know that is no longer a limiting factor for her life, and the things that she does are unbelievable, and I'm so proud of her parents for making that choice.
So it's really clear that we have to bring you back, because now I can see that other people have 6 questions apiece, so we're going to make sure and carve that out.
We can do a part 2.
Yeah, do a part 2, because we want to honor our other piece as well.
Yes, honor.
So yeah, so go ahead.
Is there any chance we could increase the view size on the screen?
Please, yes.
All right.
That's good.
So
you have it, or
I'm sharing it on my screen, but you can. So I don't know if that will actually work. So while we're trying to do that, we're going to try and shove half hour into 15 minutes here, and so we're going to talk, and Julie and I are going to talk fast, but we wanted to bring back a report to you all about what we've done to consider bringing on a youth, a student to work with the board. We've had a couple of committee meetings with Jessica and Julie and I, and Jill Adams, I think, is on the committee too, but she hasn't been able to join us yet. I had a conversation with the prior student that worked with the board, and Julie had a great conversation this week with somebody at OSU Cascades. And so I'll quickly recap my conversation. The previous student's name was Kate West. You guys who have been here longer might have recalled working with her. She is currently a student at Willamette University, and she was great to talk to yesterday. She had some pretty interesting things to say. She was a high school student when she worked with the board, but one thing I didn't know is that she was a high school student at the Redmond Proficiency Academy, which some of you may know is a different type of a high school. They structure their schedules very differently, and they allow students to kind of schedule their own process. And so it's not necessarily a traditional high school with 7 periods that they have to show up for every day. So there's a lot of flexibility with RPA that we would not see in a different type of a more traditional high school. It was also, she was with the board during COVID, and so all of the meetings were virtual. And so that made it a little easier for her to access the meetings. And so I think that's important, as we will have some recommendations as to whether or not we should be looking at a high school student versus a college student. It's some considerations to take into account. She said that she felt like we needed to spend quite a bit of effort recruiting students so that they were aware. She said she found the application, and I didn't know if there's currently an application for student involvement on the website, or if it was just the regular application to become a board member, but somehow she found it.
The regular app.
Yeah, and so I think that we'll talk about that a little bit as well, but it was a really good conversation. And then I'll turn it over to Julie to talk about OSU Cascades.
Okay, so thank you. So I was put in touch with a gal over at OSU Cascades, Erin Moran, and she's the academic program coordinator. I kind of told her what our vision was from our little meeting about what we thought would be the perfect kind of thing. And to highlight that long conversation, she was excited. She represents the master's programs, and she says, I don't think you want a master's student. They're not the right age group because you're trying to get more youthful people. She believes it's not a high school student. This was her impression without me asking her. She said, you know, they don't have flexibility in their schedules. They've got too much going on. And are they mature enough? And do they really have a focus on psychology or mental health? And how do they even get there? And how do they carve out Friday afternoon? So she said, in her opinion, it was an undergraduate student. And she would put us in touch with the kind of the 2 main people who can help us with this program. She also was very strong in her belief that COCC should be part of the if we put it out to 2 schools, just because of their collaboration with each other, and they've got students from both going back and forth. So she felt strongly that it was an undergraduate student. Psychology or social work, she felt was good. We would go through their career development department. Then we started talking internships and what that looked like. So there was just kind of this exchange of information. And then the conversation came up about a scholarship or something like that, and that we can table that for another time. But she kind of perked up and she said, if there was any way you could ever tie this to some kind of a scholarship, it would be a game changer, just because students would be, you know, interested for another reason. And so since that meeting, I've had another meeting with an organization here in town who thinks that they would be willing to provide us some scholarship funds for this. So I'm going to let Melinda go through some more of this, but I think we're on the right track for doing this. And I think it's going to come up in here. I think Melinda and I and Jessica feel strongly that we have to have board support to make this work. If we just bring somebody on board and just let them do their thing, that it's kind of pointless. So maybe we have a committee with committee support and members involved, and try it with 1 student and go from there. So go ahead.
So I'm going to kind of fly through the recommendations that we've kind of come up with, and then kind of a proposed timeline, and then some needs that we're going to have to ask everybody to pitch in. We talked about doing more than one student, and I think right now we really need to fine tune this with one student, kind of have a trial with that, and then, you know, and our recommendation would be to look for an undergrad student from college, somebody that has that flexibility and could join us and maybe contribute a little bit more. Having said that, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for us, because I think it is important to hear from the youth voice that's under 18. There might be other avenues that we could explore to invite that voice in that's separate from this. And so my vision is what we sort of table that for the time being, get this off the ground, and then give some thought to that. Kate West suggested she was born and raised in Central Oregon, and she thinks that was an important thing, to have some sense of the different demographics of the county. You know, there's a difference between the experiences in Prineville and Redmond and Bend and Sisters, and so that was her suggestion. And so that is something that I have a question mark by that on the recommendations, because I think that we need to have some conversation about that as the larger board about whether that might be a criteria to consider or to prioritize. We need to consider whether we want to try and, you know, make a criteria be students from specific majors or not. That's sort of up in the air. And this is all assuming we're going to get a bunch of people applying, which we may not. And so keeping that factor in mind, we do feel like we need to select a student who has the ability to network and kind of talk to people and find out what's going on, what the experiences of the youth are, and they can bring back to us, so that they're not they're confident enough to go talk to their professors or their instructors and student groups and find out what's really happening on the ground from a youth perspective, and then come back and kind of provide us with that input. And so it's kind of a personality type of a thing, you know, that level of confidence. Our thought is that we would start in the fall, since we're not very active, as I understand, in the summer, apparently. I don't know.
We have some things to do before we get anybody on.
Exactly, and so I have a timeline down here. We think that it would be a 1-year term, 9 months or 12 months, depending on what that kind of looks like, kind of when they start too. If we're able to get somebody in place in, say, September, and maybe 9 months for the school term, but if they wanted to continue to join us through the summer, a year, but that's kind of tied to their schooling. One thing that we talked about a bit was, what would the title be? What would their official position be? I think Julie and I favor calling it an intern rather than a board member, only because our terms are 3 years, and we're voting members. As you know, I haven't participated in a vote yet, other than to pass a motion.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. But, you know, I think that was supported by Erin Moran too, like an intern type thing. Maybe a scholarship if we can get some funds from that. And I think we, have some ideas about that. So let's see. We think that when it comes to the involvement of this board, I think all three of us are in agreement that we need some participation to really support this program. We think that having assigning a mentor to the student would be really important from this board. It could be one mentor that would provide mentorship for the entire duration of the program, or we could do a rotating thing too, and so that we each take a month, and that's our month to connect with whoever is selected, and invite them out to coffee and help them prepare for to join us at the meeting, and maybe some other duties as we kind of brainstorm what the students' needs are and how we can support them to make it a really good situation for them, but also to help them really contribute to what work we're doing here. We talked about what expectations we would ask of the student. So obviously we would want them to join our board meetings, and to come prepared to provide some input on what youth are experiencing in our communities when it comes to behavioral health, what the challenges are, what the resources are. This is a kind of a one that I think would be good. Maybe we need some more discussion about it. I would personally, we're an advisory committee to the commission. And so I feel like we ought to be we ought to have a presence at the commission. We talked about, should the student be asked to go to some of the commission meetings? that would help them kind of learn about government, local government, as well as help bridge the gap with us. But that would probably mean that I don't know that we want to ask them to do something that maybe we're not doing. So I think that's a larger discussion.
I think we should.
It might be a larger discussion, but that's one idea. And then to attend a couple of community events that support behavioral health in the community. That would require a calendar committee or some kind of an effort to get a calendar of local events, because I am not aware that we have one.
We do, it's just not being held up.
Okay, so, being on a board, I think there's some expectations that we all ought to meet as board members, and, attending some community events is one of those, like attending the commission meetings.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
The other thing we thought was, if this were to be tied to a scholarship and there was money at the end of the 9 months for these people probably to be used towards schooling or something, there would be some parameters. We feel like we can ask this of a student. We could say, you need to attend 2 community events. You need to go work at the Shepherd's House for 3 hours. You need to do a presentation to the group. You need to do an exit interview and those kinds of things. So some of this maybe looks like a lot, but it's not. 9 months of meetings and a few little things here and there, and they get a nice check at the end. So that was kind of a thought.
And a really nice thing on the resume and applications for colleges too.
Letter of recommendation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so it would go in both ways. And so tagging along with Julie's work with NAMI and talking to the OSU Cascades person, there's some potential here to explore a partnership with kind of a joint venture with NAMI here, if they're the ones. I think they're the ones that might consider providing some funding, and there might be some other community groups too. I'm a former board member of First Story, which is the Hayden Homes kind of offshoot, and I know they did at the time that I served there, a grant program. It's not a lot of money, but it's a little bit of money, and so could we consider this as a joint venture with another agency or another nonprofit? That might be an opportunity to kind of expand the breadth of the internship, if you will.
One thing that I had a meeting with NAMI the other day and kind of floated this by her, and she was very excited because NAMI did have an intern last year that was a little bit of a different kind of an intern. And we started talking about, you just imagine what NAMI could provide in terms of opportunities for the student to do during the course of 9 months, because NAMI has so many things going on as well. So it would be a win-win for both of them. They would be providing some scholarship money, and the intern would be doing some work on their behalf and advocating for NAMI and getting the word out. So could be a good partnership. We probably don't need to go through the.
Let me just see if I can wrap a little bit about this. So this is the kind of work that we need to do in the board meeting. This is what became really clear when we were trying to figure out this stuff here. And I think the one woman who had experience with the high school person who's a board member isn't here today, is that right? Okay, so there's a couple things I'd like to suggest. One of them I just thought of today, and I don't think anybody's gonna like, so I'm gonna put it out here. I may be recommending this meeting go for an hour and a half, because my experience is we're often rushed, and I don't want another hour and a half meeting because I have to push out my stuff. But if we're gonna have time to work in this group, maybe we need that extra 15 minutes. So I'm gonna float that by Dana and Holly and see if it's a hard no, a yes, or a maybe. So just think about what you have. Number 2, what is our presentation for next month? Do you know?
You're looking at me?
No.
I just have my budget next week.
I'll look at you.
Okay.
But Patty suggested somebody that's a provider of recovery stuff in the,
I'm thinking that we need to work on this. So if there's a way to carve out for next month, so it doesn't get lost in our agendas, because it will be June, July, August, right?
Yeah.
So that we can have a structured discussion around some of these things, because we really can't move forward on any of this until we have some structure around it. And when I think about like, for example, we're out of time, but when I think about a student bringing back what they're learning, many of us are on other boards and we don't bring back what we're doing. So, do we want to ask a student to do something that we ourselves could do and don't do? So that's where the larger discussion comes out. Period. So anyway, is there?
I think, I don't think we have time to do this, but I won't go through the whole proposed timeline, except that under the May part, there's a couple of decision points that we do need to make in order to take the next step.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to do the application and bring that, and we can have this
Can we
conversation.
develop an application?
Yeah, I can work on that, and, that's not a problem, but there's some decision points that I need some guidance from.
Okay.
Do we want to kind of go to, look for a student with some local ties to Central Oregon, Deschutes County? Do we want to focus on students with specific majors? What is the title that we're looking at? And I think that these ideas of exploring a joint venture with NAMI and the scholarship, those can be tabled. I think those are
Or I can
reasonable
keep those moving.
I think that all is table, because for example, I'm thinking, recruiting at a college is nice, but what about somebody who's not attached to a college that has lived experience? So I think that this whole thing needs to be further massaged out with a voice. So I think that whole proposed time has to go out a month.
Okay, so, but what I think then that means, if we can't shoot for getting started like in the fall,
it wouldn't start in September.
That's why we prioritize it.
May I speak? I know I might be a little out of turn, but
no, please do.
I'd like to put this in the notes. I know I'm not a member, and if I need to work through Paul or somebody else, I can do that. But I think that while we talk about the end user, the person who's receiving services, it would be imperative that an internship would include staying in a foster home for a week and walking the walk with that provider or something to that effect. A lot of this is fabulous in its leadership, but if our ultimate end user and their well-being and their quality of life, if they've never met a user, never lived with a user, then I think we're missing a huge opportunity. A lot like when you practice teach, or you'd practice nurturing, or you're learning to be a physical therapist and you track along and follow a physical therapist for a while. So I'd like to put that in the minutes, please.
Thank you, Linda. That's lovely. And I was also thinking about, and I know we had kind of a rushed meeting, so this work is huge based on the time that we had, but also maybe a person with IDD that's, fairly able to do that. So that's why I think we need to prioritize this, and, we can't do that and run out of time. So.
Well, thank you for letting me speak as a guest.
Linda, that was valuable, actually, very valuable. And so can we prioritize this for next month? That's my question. Okay.
So what do you need really bad right now? Anything?
if we're gonna kind of.
Well, the thing about the application is that that's something that Dana can help us with, because it has to go through kind of a county process. And that's what we had to do for the application that you did, but you didn't find it as user-friendly as it could be. So we want to take back that feedback, then see how we can broaden that application that can be user-friendly across anybody who wants to be a board member, because just because you're over 18 doesn't mean you read at a college level, et cetera, et cetera. So if the application is not working for somebody with your skill, then it's not going to work for anybody. So that's how come I think, doing that application piece needs to be revisited with our insight that we have, just like Linda said, the end user. You were our first end user.
Yeah. One other thing I want to just throw out there as we're thinking about it is people who are not students. And I get that. I understand that. And we talked about that last night. What about somebody who's going to school maybe part-time, but also has a job, but they're going to school? I think this is called a student internship. And the reason that I think we were so interested in it is because of the expectation that they could go to their school, they could go to their administration as well as the classroom and get feedback from students. It's a whole different internship if they're not students. I mean,
well, that's why we have to discuss it.
Yeah,
because if we have a youth board member, or is it a student board member? Right. So that's how come we can't do it in 15 minutes.
I think
Right.
this, I think this is a student thing. If somebody that wanted to just fill out the application as a board member the way you did, and they happen to be 17, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, we
But
can
might
have more than one person.
I know young people that are living in a shelter that are in early recovery, that are working at Safeway doing stocking boxes. And what kind of experience is that person having? So we're out of time, we're over time, and we just have a lot to talk about. So we need to prioritize this for next time, for the whole meeting, I'd like.
And I will be gone. I'm so sorry.
I will be your voice. We'll talk over the phone.
Okay. Well, we'll have a meeting before, just so I can throw my things in, and then I'll help get prepared.
Sounds good. All right, sorry, everybody, but yeah.
And by the way, this meeting was always an hour and a half until we went to Zoom, and then we didn't
Okay, I'm gonna be talking to them.
get very
about that.
much dialogue on Zoom.
And see, and Paul, I mean, I'm very interested in IDD. In fact, I wrote it down. Hey, that's a deliverable, because one of the things we identified that we didn't do last year is talk IDD. So here, the rushing doesn't really benefit anybody. And
there's something that, Paul's in kind of a unique position here in Deschutes County because he is part of behavioral health. He is part of the health department. A lot of counties, they're completely separate.
And I've got all kinds of questions for you.
Well, call me anytime.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Sorry it was rushed and sorry I